Elephants were known by the Roman Empire, but after the empire fell, elephants were much rarer in Europe during the medieval period. In fact, there might not have been any elephants seen in Europe for hundreds of years. But one elephant was known to be in Europe during medieval times, and that elephant might have been the model for European understanding of pachyderms into the modern age. Abdul-Abbas, Charlemagne's great elephant, is only known through fragments of literature today, but might well have been the most famous elephant in history, and certainly was a symbol of the tenuous connections that remained in the medieval period between Europe and the East. It is history that deserves to be remembered. If you go back far enough, about 14,000 years ago, you can find elephants in Europe in the form of mammoths. Even further back, there were other elephants native to Europe, like the straight-tusked elephant, which ranged as far as Great Britain in interglacial periods. Remains of both have been found associated with human tools and spears. The straight-tusked elephant is believed to be the ancestor of most of the various dwarf elephants known to have lived on islands in the Mediterranean. Possibly the first time Europeans encountered elephants was in 326 BC, when Alexander the Great met elephants in Asia on his campaigns eastward. After defeating King Porus, Alexander commissioned coins that depicted Porus astride an elephant. Aristotle seems to have seen a live elephant based on his descriptions, but it's unclear how or even when he might have seen it. It was Alexander's encounters with elephants that created his connection with them. Elephants guarded his tent, and his funeral chariot was adorned with images of them. Alexander's conquered empire brought Europe closer to cultures that had long lived with and used elephants, especially in warfare. By 280 BC, Pyrrhus of Epirus brought elephants with him when he crossed the Epirus to Italy. Carthage famously used their war elephants in the First and Second Punic Wars, which began in 264 BC. The Romans also made use of war elephants, especially after the Punic Wars, when they were used to conquer Greece and the successor kingdoms. Julius Caesar may have brought one with him when he invaded Britain in 55 and 54 BC, and Emperor Claudius definitely did in 43 AD. The elephants were a symbol of power and a great pretension, as Alexander biographer Robert Lane Fox put it. The Romans also used the elephant in entertainment. They were used in circus acts, banging cymbals, and walking tightropes and dancing. They were a significant symbol of the connection between the Western European cultures and those in Asia. And the decline and fall of Rome saw elephants disappear almost completely from Europe, although their memory remained and their image was sometimes used. Europeans commonly represented elephants with stone fortresses on their backs, a misunderstanding of the howdah, carriage on an elephant's back from which soldiers would fight. Europe in the Middle Ages was more fragmented than it had been under Rome, and connections between great powers of Europe, Asia, and Africa was more limited. New powers, however, rose. The most powerful of the early 700s was the Umayyad Caliphate, which stretched from the Pyrenees to the borders of modern India. In Europe, the Eastern Roman Empire remained powerful in Anatolia and Eastern Europe, while in Western Europe, the Frankish kingdom was on the rise. Beginning in 719, the Umayyads invaded Gaul, pressing into Christian Europe. And for the next 40 years, the Franks and the Umayyads fought, with the Franks finally pushing the Umayyads back into Iberia when Pepin the Short retook Narbonne in 759. Meanwhile, the Umayyad Caliphate had collapsed in the face of a popular revolt. By 750, the Umayyads were out, and the Abbasid Caliphate took its place. Spain, however, remained in the control of Umayyad survivors, who declared themselves the Emirate of Cordoba. The situation led to a fairly unique political connection between the Frankish Carolingian Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate, which shared no borders. Much of this potential alliance is conjecture, as little concrete cooperation seems to have occurred, but shortly after the formation of the Abbasid Caliphate, Pepin the Short seems to have made an effort to secure an alliance against Cordoba when he sent an embassy to Baghdad in 765, and a matching Abbasid embassy arrived in France in 768. Connections between the two polities certainly existed, and Arab coins are known to have circulated within the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne succeeded his father, Pepin the Short, as king of the Franks in 768, and he continued to expand the empire into Italy, culminating with his coronation as emperor in Rome in 800. In 797, Charlemagne sent the first of at least 3 embassies to the Abbasid Caliph, Harun al-Rashid. According to the Frankish annals, Charlemagne sent 3 people: Lantfried, Sigismund, and Isaac the Jew, thought to have been sent along as a translator. 4 years later, in Pavia, Italy, he met with 2 envoys that had been sent in return, one from al-Rashid himself and another from the Abbasid governor of Africa. It was customary to send gifts with these kinds of embassies, and the envoys brought news of one of the gifts that al-Rashid was sending: an elephant. According to Einhard, who served as a kind of minister of public works for Charlemagne and who wrote the first biography of the king, when the delegation had first been sent, they had been given instructions to ask directly for an elephant. Charlemagne got news of the elephant only months after he had been crowned emperor in Rome by the Pope on December 25th, 800. It's possible that no elephant had been seen in Europe for hundreds of years, and its arrival would be a significant symbol of power for the Frankish king. Of course, the elephant itself would have a long way to travel, from the Abbasid lands of Africa and the Middle East to Central and Southern Europe, and that was only part of the challenge. Moving the elephant through Byzantine territory would be difficult, as the Abbasids and Byzantines were not on good terms, and Cordoba in Spain prevented any crossing through Iberia, which left only a significant journey by sea to cross the Mediterranean. Charlemagne immediately ordered a fleet prepared to transfer the elephant and any other gifts sent by the caliph. According to the Frankish annals, Isaac and the elephant came to Europe via Africa, at the time referring to a region along the Libyan and Tunisian coasts. The exact journey is unknown, not detailed in any of the sources, although possible journeys have been reconstructed. The elephant, called Abdul-Abbas or Abdul-Abbas, arrived in Italy at Porto Venere on the Ligurian coast in October 801. Isaac and Abul-Abbas spent the winter in northern Italy before crossing the Alps in the spring to arrive at Charlemagne's court in Aachen on July 20th, 802. Numerous other gifts also arrived, including a magnificent water clock and a chess set. There is no direct evidence that says where precisely al-Rashid got the elephant. The Abbasids did not use elephants in war and did not have a local supply in Baghdad, their capital. It isn't even clear if the elephant he sent was an Asian elephant or an African one, as Frankish sources make no direct mention of its origin or describe it in enough detail for that to be determined. Sam Otwell Soulsby, author of The Emperor and the Elephant, summarized the basic evidence for the elephant's origins in a blog post for the historian's Sketchpad. The apparent journey from Africa could imply that the elephant was sourced from Africa, although it's clear that by that time the population of elephants used by Hannibal and the Carthaginians were long extinct. Otwell Soulsby also mentions a 9th century ivory plaque depicting the Virgin Mary. Most ivory artwork from this era used older Roman ivory, but radiocarbon dating has proven that this particular ivory was not ancient in origin, meaning that the ivory came from a contemporary source, and it's too large to have come from an Asian elephant. Some have argued that this ivory must have come from Abul-Abbas after his death, although there's no direct evidence. Otwell Soulsby, however, concludes that Abul-Abbas was likely Asian for a few reasons. While there are few references to the Frankish connections in contemporary sources from the Caliphate, multiple sources from the region say that African elephants were not trainable. Whether it was true or not that African elephants couldn't be trained, Abbasid writers seem to believe that they weren't, implying that the Caliph would have looked to India for an elephant. Later tales of Abul-Abbas sometimes refer to it as a white elephant, but the contemporary sources don't mention anything significant about its coloring. His name is a mystery, too. Abul-Abbas could have been what he was called, or it might simply have identified the elephant as a gift of the Abbasids. The name refers to the founder of the Abbasid dynasty, but it's possible that Abul-Abbas had a different name that had been lost to history. Among the many mysteries is whether a caretaker or mahout, someone who works with and cares for elephants, was sent with him. If a caretaker was sent, he is not mentioned, but it's logical to imagine someone familiar with elephant care accompanied Abul-Abbas. Almost nothing else is said about Abul-Abbas in any of the surviving chronicles. He was the only known elephant in Europe for a period of centuries, before or after, and it's likely that accurate depictions of elephants from the 9th century in Europe came from artists who saw Abul-Abbas, but no evidence regarding when or where people might have seen the elephant is sure. Charlemagne had several walled parks that represented early menageries, including one at Aachen, and it's likely that Abul-Abbas spent some time in some of them. He was likely displayed in some manner as he seems to have become famous. An Irish monk in 825 addressed the odd European conception that elephants could not lie down, writing that another writer makes one mistake about elephants when he says that the elephant never lies down, for he certainly does lie down, as the people at large of the Frankish kingdom saw at the time of Emperor Charles. Extrapolating from the fact that he is described as an adult elephant when he arrived in Europe, Abul-Abbas was likely born sometime in the 770s or 780s. Modern authors have added embellishments to the story. In the book Animals and Men, author Herman Dembach writes that Charlemagne decided that the elephant was to be sent to different parts of the Frankish kingdom each spring. He claims that the elephant was displayed in Speyer, Strasbourg, Verdun, Augsburg, and Paderborn. Archaeologist Richard Hodges, in a 2000 article in History Today, says that Abul-Abbas had originally been owned by an India Raja before Harun's predecessor acquired it. Like the claims of a white elephant, these claims lack contemporary records. The only other certain mention of Abul-Abbas comes in the Frankish annals for the year 810. King Godfried of the Danes had attacked Frisia and already caused significant damage. Charlemagne sent out messengers everywhere to gather an army and cross the Rhine. While he stayed there a few days, the chronicle continues, the elephant which Harun, the king of the Saracens, had sent him, suddenly died. No other mention of the elephant is made, but because it is sandwiched between descriptions of the campaign against Godfried, it has often been assumed that Charlemagne had brought the elephant with him, possibly to use as a war elephant against the Danes. Dimback's Animals and Men adds that Abul-Abbas was over 40 years old at that point and suffered from rheumatism. He claims the cool weather killed the elephant, which developed pneumonia. Whatever actually killed him, Abul-Abbas died in 810, and the exact location of Charlemagne at the time has never been determined. A 1746 publication identifies the location as modern Vessels. Several large bones found in the area were claimed to be the remains of the elephant himself. The elephant had come to so symbolize Charlemagne that after his death, his body was draped by a Byzantine cloth decorated with elephants. Despite the dearth of information about Abdul-Abbas, the elephant is always mentioned in pieces about Charlemagne in the period, showing how important that elephant was as a symbol of power during the period. And while much of the story has been fabricated since, and the true story of the elephant's life is likely lost to history, the mere presence of the elephant in Europe is proof of the importance and complexity of diplomacy between the great powers during the medieval period. And it is also proof that communication and trade continued between Europe and the Far East even after the fall of the Roman Empire. Abdul-Abbas is the only elephant known to have been in Europe between the fall of the Roman Empire in roughly the 5th century AD and an elephant that was gifted to the Holy Roman Emperor in the 13th century, a period of some 750 years. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.